We need to operationalize ideas. We have a lot of ideas to solve problems of the world.
How can we build and scale the new business models, products and services, marketplaces, partnerships, and alliances that will strengthen our resilience in the areas of food security, public health and wellness, education, and social cohesion and culture?
Welcome to MDM Live. This is an MDM student or alumni-led platform that aims to build community of social impact leaders, game changers, and champions. This is brought to you by Stephen Zwillig School of Development Management, Masters in Development Management program. We encourage all our viewers to share this event and host your own watch party in your wall with your group or in your pages. So our topic for this evening about the urgency for dignified menstruation amid pandemic. I am Mafe. I'm from MDM 2019 and also the country coordinator for the Philippine chapter of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. Joining us for today's episode are different women making a stand for dignified menstruation in their respective country. Please introduce yourself and give a little background about your current affiliations. So let us start with Radha, followed by Millie and Anna.
Namaste.
Hello, Maeve.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Radha Paudel, nurse, author, activist, and founder for Global South Coalition. I'm MDM graduate 2010 and AAA awardee 2020. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Good morning. Good evening, everywhere. My name is Anna. I study religious and cross-cultural studies in Indonesia. I took my master degree, and I'm the country coordinator for Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. Greeting from Indonesia.
Good morning. My name is Millie Adhikari. I am a public health practitioner and a sexual and reproductive health educator and healthcare worker. I am based here in USA, and I am the country coordinator for the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation here and a steering committee member as well. Thank you so much for this platform, and I'm beyond excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, for giving us time. I know, Millie, it's really very early in your area, but thank you for gracing us today. And of course, to our founder, to Radha, thank you very much for this advocacy. So there are a lot of things that we want to talk about in this hour. And to start, of course, we would want to ask first, to Radha, can you tell us more about what for you is dignified menstruation and how dignified menstruation is a key to achieving the SDGs?
Thank you. Dignified menstruation is a state of free from any forms of abuses, discrimination, restriction associated with the menstruation. In other words, there is no differences between 25 days and 5 days in terms of discrimination. This is the definition we use in a daily basis. But in a deeper level, I always like to define by 3P. The first P is principally we need to address menstruation from the lens of human right and political concern. And second P, practically. Practically, we need to address all immediate and long-term negative consequences that experienced by the menstruators that should be addressed by the dignified menstruation. And it has to go throughout the life cycle. It's not only the business of 5 days of bleeding or 60 ml of bleeding. It should go throughout the life cycle, womb to tomb, and in many cultures, even beyond the death. And third P is always power. We need to reconstruct the power since childhood, because menstrual practice is a key indicator or key determinant to construct and shape the power within the family. That means between girls and boys. And in order to cultivate the culture of gender equality, justful society, we need to have a dialogue on dignity during menstruation since home. And it is precondition for the SDG. We all are living at the era of 2030 agenda. That means we have 17 goals and 169 targets to achieve these goals. We are so busy before the COVID, and even now, during the COVID, the SDGs are still relevant, and we are working for that. And unless and until we do not have a dialogue on dignified menstruation, we cannot achieve the 17 goals. Let me give one example. The SDG says elimination of all forms of gender-based violence. Till date, the global policy, UN, WHO, not recognize the discrimination, abuses, violences, which is occurred from the menstrual practice. And in that situation, how could we achieve the SDG? There are so many examples. It is not only relevant with the gender equality or health, it is relevant with the 9 goals. Poverty, how could we have the access to the resources, the basic services? Hunger, how could we eliminate the severe forms of malnutrition without talking menstruation? Because of the menstruation in many cultures, there are so many restrictions. The menstruators cannot have access with the nutritious food. We always need to consider the slogan of the SDG, no one leave behind. And we always need to consider that the taboos, the stigma, discrimination, restriction during menstruation is practicing across the globe, regardless of caste, class, gender, religion, region, with the differences of names, forms, severity, visibility. Many friends from developed countries, they claim that, oh, this is not the issue of them. This is only the issue of the global south. But if we go in a deeper level, if we analyze the 24/7, how the menstruators are living, and we can come up with the abuses, discrimination, violences during menstruation across the globe. Some were visible, some were not visible. So that is why, without having a dialogue on dignity during menstruation, the SDGs are merely impossible to achieve. And because of the COVID, the situation is more panic, because the menstruation is already missing out in the development, feminism, and the human rights discourse. Though the menstruation exists for last 4 billion years in this universe. And now, because of the COVID, the menstruation is more hiding. It's like hibernating. And then it created so many abuses, violences, exploitation, even during COVID and other kind of disaster everywhere across the globe.
Yeah, Radha, just for the benefit of our viewers, can you tell more about the restrictions that people are experiencing in Nepal? Because I believe not a lot of people do not know what do you mean by the restrictions that you are experiencing in Nepal?
The restriction, there are many restrictions. A restriction related with the touch. They cannot touch the plant, the main members, and restriction related with the mobility. They cannot go as their wish, like temple or mosque or anywhere which is considered religious or cultural activities. And they also cannot eat the foods which is related with the citrus food, milk product. And these are not only the restriction during menstruation in Nepal. It is, if you go through the website of the dignifiedmenstruation.org, we have already displayed the documents from across the globe, across the continent, and you can see there are restrictions everywhere. But the restriction in some part of Nepal is visible, and you may know from the international media it is a little bit more severe. But if you go the micro details, it is everywhere, in Australia, in Canada, in USA. Let me give one example why the people are talking period instead of the saying menstruation directly. The saying menstruation or whisper or continental the product or hygiene product, this is all it's kind of excuses, kind of abuses. They do not like to talk about the menstruation directly.
Yeah.
And even in the advertisement of the sanitary product, even saying sanitary is also the taboo. They don't like to call menstrual product. They call sanitary product because the pad, the menstrual cup are not like the soap or choline or something cleaning material. It is particularly used for the menstruation, to manage the menstruation. But people said sanitary pad or sanitary product, sanitary hygiene or hygiene product, something like that. So that means they have a deep level of silence, deep level of ignorance about the menstruation. Menstruation is a really complex. It has a direct connection with the politics, the economics, the socio-cultural activities, the health, the education, the environment. It has a very deep connection throughout the life cycle, and wherever we are, no matter where we are, it is belong with our universe. But we never think in that way, and we always think, oh, it is a dirty, it is impure, let's hide it, let's manage it. And we're just talking about the menstrual pad or tampon or cup or something related with the hygiene, like constructing the toilet. It is a very important. Talking about the pad or tampon or toilet or water supply are very important component for the dignified menstruation, but it doesn't guarantee the dignity during menstruation. Each menstruators deserve the dignity during menstruation. As I already mentioned, the principle, it is a human right concern. It's not given by someone, it is not granted by someone. It is as a virtue of the human being. We all deserve the dignity during menstruation. And what kind of product we like to use, what kind of mobility we wanted to use. And in Philippines, let me give you one example. In Philippines, during the first menstruation, they have to jump in. Based on the jump in, their bleeding time depend. And this is really myth. And the menstruation is entirely pure bleeding, which is cannot conceive because of some reason, and that is why it bleeds, and it is a tear of the inner lining of the uterus. And that kind of actually it is constructed by the nature and defined by the science. And today we are connecting the people from USA, Indonesia, Philippines, and Nepal, and because of the technology, because of the science, and we are not ready to accept, to see the menstruation from the perspective of the science and technology. And this is the time, this is the high time to see the menstruation from the perspective of the human right, from the perspective of the political right. And this is the everyone business. It is not only my business.
Yes, and so that's why we also would want to hear from our guest from the USA and from Indonesia, like what made you interested to actually support Rada's advocacy, and what does that mean to you? We'll start with Millie.
Thank you so much. So, I think that inherently I was very much interested in sexual and reproductive health, working as or studying as a public health student, as well as working deeply in sexual health from the very beginning of my academic career. And, I myself, working in sexual health and as a sex ed educator for approximately 4+ years, we had a lot of content on sexual health, on infections, on diseases, on conditions, on even safer sex, but we never touched on menstruation, even though it is a critical component of sexual and reproductive health. It is one of the main components. And I realized, in all my education, all this fancy education, we had never discussed menstruation. And when I came in contact, I actually went looking for Radha in Nepal. So I had heard about her in the internet sphere as this menstrual activist in Nepal, and I was very much interested to learn from her. And so after I graduated from my university here with a bachelor's, I went looking for her in Nepal to do work with her. And unfortunately, I was misguided and I was in a different space and I didn't connect with her. But after I did, and I really came to know the intrinsic relationship between menstruation and sexual health, as well as the key component to achieving gender equality, gender equity, and to achieve this inalienable human right that we have. And it was that missing component in my sexual and reproductive health work that really, sort of tied together everything for me. Without bodily autonomy, without liberation of our bodies, which begins with menstruation, it is impossible to achieve gender equality. The fact that I had been doing so much work in sexual health without talking about menstruation blew my own mind. And I was, it was a sort of enlightenment process where I was like, whoa, we haven't been talking about the one critical component, which is menstruation. And this includes, like Radha saying, this is not merely your reproductive years. You are still affected by menstruation and the social values around menstruation when you are not menstruating yet. So, it begins even before you are born. When someone knows the sex of the pregnancy, immediately, you say, in a lot of cultures, you say, oh, it's a girl. Oh, next time you'll try. It'll be better next time. Because in a lot of countries, you want boys. And what is the main difference? The critical difference is the bleeding or the not bleeding. And in a lot of people, that also changes. But we don't talk about how important menstruation is, and not just for women or people categorized as women, but for any menstruator and also non-menstruators. Even if we go beyond your loved ones and your family members, non-menstruators who bleed live with menstruators. More than half of the globe are menstruators, and yet this topic and this critical component is suppressed and it is invisible. Though menstruation is invisible, the need of menstrual products, the need for menstrual equality, for dignity is invisible. And you can see that, in the COVID response as well. About, 70% of all the healthcare workers are menstruators. However, when this initially started in Wuhan, China, for the menstruators who were the healthcare workers, the primary healthcare workers fighting COVID-19 at that time, the nurses, they were not given menstrual products as a part of their PPE. So you're supposed to protect these people who are working avidly against this pandemic, and you forget that they bleed because because decision makers are generally non-menstruators due to the structure of our society, and thus it is their decision making, and in that they do not consider menstruation because it is not considered something that is a priority. It is a woman's business, a female's business, somewhere that we don't talk about. Oh, they'll take care of it. It's never thought about. But these healthcare workers were facing great sexual and reproductive health inaccessibility to their products, as well as they were getting these infections. They were getting bladder infection, UTIs, vaginitis, and they're getting this because they don't have proper protocol in their PPE. And you can think of that as like inaccessibility to menstrual products, but if you really think about it, it's the fact that it was never thought about. It never occurred that menstruation is this critical component of one's life, and it doesn't stop because of COVID. COVID can alter your cycle. It can make your bleeding, because our menstruation interacts with the environment, and it is affected by the environment that you're in, but it does not stop. It's part of evolution. It is going to continue throughout our life. And so that means that it needs to be prioritized. And these nurses, when they did initially complain to their managers about the fact that they don't have menstrual products, they were told to stay quiet. Their transaction of their complaint was hidden, actually, because they thought it was improper to display that globally. So these nurses that are fighting COVID-19, this important critical component, who are doing this great work and who are advertised as heroes in our media, but then are violated against, and they're gaslighted, and they're told to use birth control without discussing the cautions and the consequences of using medication to stop menstruation. So as you can see, it's really about the fact that menstruation and menstrual discrimination and the violence against menstruation is intrinsically woven into society. And so it's so discreet, really. And also, we focus on Nepal, we focus on Topadi, or that idea of this restriction where you're outside of the home, because that's visible, that we can see. And because the menstrual movement also has largely been overtaken by people from the global north, there's this complexity of the white savior mentality, which exists in a lot of our other sustainable goals, for poverty, for ending hunger, education. It's all about, we must go there and teach those people over there. That's the mentality that we have, and that exists in menstrual health as well, which is why we let's throw a tampon, let's throw pads at them, and they'll be fine. They'll hide it, they'll take care of it. So again, missing that component of human rights, and missing that component of this intrinsic human right, and this violation of our ability to live happy and healthy and fulfilling lives, which is impossible without dignified menstruation.
Yeah, I agree. Can we hear also from Anna from Indonesia?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Before talking about menstruation and pandemic in Indonesia, I will give a bit context of what happened in Indonesia. So when the first time Rada talked to me about the idea of dignified menstruation, I tried to reflect what happened in Indonesia, in my country, and there is a lot of similarity, like regarding the myths and the taboo. Just like what happened in Nepal, we also have, we associate menstruation with dirty, impure, sometimes with bad luck. And so, and this is come from the Abrahamic sacred text that says menstruation is the original sin. It makes women got suffered from menstruation because they have original sins. So this culture is bring for centuries, and we still stick on that idea. The impact of this taboo and stigma is there not only restriction and harmful practices, like we have restriction from food, certain food, and restriction from cleaning our body during menstruation, restriction from mobility, restriction to touch, and also restriction to participate in certain events. And the paradox things, and when we talk about the SDGs, as Rada mentioned, there is a finding in Indonesia that in 2016, UNICEF conduct a research regarding menstruation in some schools in 3 different areas, and it found that 1 of 6 students, they choose not to go to school, or they choose to go home earlier during the menstruation. It's not only because there is a lack of facility in the school, but also because they cannot stand the mocking and the mocking from their peer and their friends. And what is the biggest impact? The idea of degrading the girls during menstruation, it will strengthen the difference and the less that women are not only different from men but also less from men. And during some interview, we found that some women or hate their body because of this idea. And how could we talk about the SDGs and its slogan, "No one left behind"? If one of 6 students they choose to go home when they have menstruation. And this idea is came not only from religious but also from tradition interpretation. Um, and what happened in Indonesia during the pandemic is, of course, we don't talk specifically about what happened with the patient, with the COVID patient during the menstruation, with the nurse, with the doctor, or the hospital services. They have worked for hours with the certain clothes, as we know, for their safety, and we don't know how do they manage their menstruation during that time. And the other thing is the support from the government during the menstruation, during the disaster, very rare that include menstrual management product. And it will be hard from the family from low income or when they lost their income because of the pandemic. Menstrual product is not the priority for the expense. And not only for the menstrual product, but also certain food that women need during the menstruation, they cannot afford for that. So a lot of challenges, a lot of homework, but I will talk about that later. And yeah, I think it is important to talk about dignity. Everything, when we talk about menstruation, it is important to talk about dignity first, to ensure that the idea of menstruation did not strengthen the idea of misogynist, and did not strengthen the idea that the girls are less than the boys. Okay, I think that's all for now.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And so we have a question from our audience from the Facebook. It's Janina, and she asked, like, can someone explain again or give more examples about violence against menstruation? So anyone can actually respond to this question. Do you want Radha? Yeah. Okay. You can unmute your mic first. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
now.
When we talk about violence against women, first we need to recall the definition for sexual and gender-based violence. UN define any act that perpetrated against a person's will and is based on gender norms and unequal power relation. We need to recall that definition first. While you are restricted for having any citrus fruit or going to school or eating food in a same dining table, or you are not able to say publicly about the menstrual product. This is all the act of the menstruator's will. All the act against the menstruator's will. We need to see the UN definition and the practice what we have exist today. Just let me link with the Anna's statement. How many children are not able to go to the school? Why the menstruation is considered as a dirty or impure or bad luck? So these kind of things already are the conditions of condition against person's will. So that is why whatever the practices exist in this globe, no matter whether we are white or black or from south or north, these all the forms of violence against menstruators. And let me recall again the CEDAW, the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Girls and Women, that UN have in 1979. Since 1979 to today, it is already 42 years, and we are not talking about the menstruation rate. In 1995, in Beijing conference, the Hillary Clinton said the women's rights are the human's right. In 1996, WHO said the violence are the public health issue. The intimate partner violence, sexual abuse, all are the violation of the human right. So we keep talking about the different kind of convention, protocols, but we are not seeing the menstruation as a form of gender-based violence. Actually, it is already exist in the society. Why the intimate partner violence occurring at Philippines or in USA? Because there is a matter of the gender norms and unequal power relationship, and that unequal power relationship constructed and shaped by the menstrual practice. Let's talk about the family where the boys and girls are from USA. Between the age of 6 to 9 years, the girls know somehow about the menstruation from the bathroom, or leaking of the blood, or tampon, or some kind of thing, or in market, or advertisement in media or movie, right? And then the girls consider herself inferior, powerless, disadvantaged, and she starts to see herself all the time. Oh, I have to keep quiet. I should not speak. And even the violences or some bad comments from her brother, she cannot speak. At the meantime, the boy, her brother, same her age, he considered himself the power, privilege, pure, and superior. And he started to perpetuate his power. And till date, the global research, UN, keeps saying that home is the most unsafe place. More than 30% of the violences took place at home and by the family members. That could be a dad or brother or cousin or someone, some relatives. Why it happened? Because we are not talking about the menstruation. We don't have any kind of conversation. And the girls considered herself as a powerless. Oh, I'm so poor. And in the meantime, boys consider themselves, I'm powerful. And that notion socialized in a way that, and at the end of the day, he commits the violence with her partner or wife or someone. And in the meantime, the girls, most of the menstruators are girls, and they don't have an agency, they don't have a confidence to speak, to say no. We keep saying today, we have to accept the no. We have to say no. But how she can say no? Unless and until we don't teach her to say no from home. That is why the whatever the practice we have today globally around menstruation, especially the menstrual abuse, the discrimination, restriction, violences, all are not included under the gender-based violence. That is why it is always confusing to the people who are not thinking from that perspective. And today, I urge to all viewers to think upside down approach. this is the time, because of the COVID-19, we all are thinking differently. And let's review our thinking process. Let's review our policies, UN policies, global policies, our practices. And you think yourself whether you have a dialogue about menstruation at your home or not. At what age you start to discuss? In the college or in the nursery school, or when? And when you know about the menstruation, what was your first feeling? Are you really empowered, or feeling poor, or feeling disgusting, shock? So this is the time to think within ourselves and our family and our practice, to have a dialogue on dignified menstruation in order to prevent sexual and gender-based violence, improve sexual and reproductive health, and achieve SDGs.
Millie, you want to add something? Unmute your mic. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So as somebody who, working here in the global north in USA, and working as a sexual and reproductive health specialist for a for a sexual and reproductive health clinic here, a community clinic, I encounter a diverse number of patients who range, differently from their race and ethnicity and language and religion to class. And amongst them all, the similarity and the commonality that I have found is, one, the lack of knowledge around menstruation, menstrual health, and the understanding of menstruation and how it is intrinsic to our sexual and reproductive health. This I consider to also be a part of that violence against menstruation and menstruators, because withholding information and education and knowledge about one's body that is intrinsic to my everyday health, my menstrual health does not begin and stop with the bleeding days. As we know, there is premenstrual symptoms, there is postmenstrual symptoms, then there's menstruation itself. That covers all the days of the month, which means it covers all the days of the years, which means it covers all the days of my life. And that impacts others around me. But when we do not teach what menstruation is in terms of the biology, in terms of the social value, in terms of your sexual and reproductive health, then we do not know. And when someone does not know about something, they are powerless in that instant about that thing. So when patients come in and they are unaware of their menstrual status, they do not know about all the days, they do not know that they're not fertile for all of the days. This idea that, menstruators are these bleeding, crazy creatures walking around. And, this is something that Radha had mentioned to me, is that here in the US, when the voting rights began, one of the quotes that, men at that time used to say that women should not vote is that they leak. The quote is that they cannot vote because they leak, as if we are leaking out our knowledge, and our brains are interconnected, and that's why we're unable to make good decisions, when we see what decisions have been made by non-menstruators. And so when you don't have the power to talk about menstruation, and when we do not empower menstruators to talk about menstruation, what happens is that they cannot talk about their vagina, they cannot talk about their vulva, they cannot talk about their uterus. They think that pain is normal through their menstrual cycle. They don't want to discuss it. They don't want to talk to their parents about it, their guardians, their friends. Like Anna was mentioning, this idea of mocking and teasing by your friends, even menstruators, because we internalize the concept as well, non-menstruators and menstruators. So we perpetrate and we maintain the violence against menstruation by having ignorance on that topic. And then you cannot talk about anything else. If you do not have the ability to talk about your own body, then how do you say no to somebody else? If you do not have the ability or the knowledge or the space or the security to talk about your menstruation, then it is impossible for you to demand justice for yourself. It's impossible for you to even embody that space because of that. And I see that a lot with my patients. And, it's something that it's a very critical component of my patient education, is that we talk about menstruation. And I say say, and I ask him, when is the last time that you menstruated? And, you know, it'll always be a sort of a shock at first. They're like, what? My period? You know, and it's like, yes, your period, which is your menses or your menstruation. And so, you know, always try to use those words. And I think if there's a question of how do we begin at home for any viewers, it's that you start by talking about it. Just start by educating yourself and then just talking about it. Start with your loved ones and then move forward in your social spaces, because it is appropriate to talk about it anywhere, because it is a part of living and breathing and walking and talking. It is thus menstruating.
Thank you, Millie. Anna, you have something to say also?
Yeah, very little, because I think Radha and Millie already talked. already. Okay, I think the very fundamental violence against menstruation is the wrong information. The wrong information regarding menstruation. The impure talk about menstruation. I think that was the very fundamental violence against menstruation. When we talk about menstruation, especially in Indonesia, uh, we are talking about what to do and what not to do. What is prohibit, what you can do, what you cannot do, and we are very rare talk about that was that menstruation. It's a very common biological process. It is very attached to the human process on, on living their life, and they don't know about the biological process, but they only know, their parents, their teacher only teach about, as well as their society only teach about what is prohibited during the menstruation. And uh, they do not have the idea, any idea that menstruation have a social value also, that put women not only equal with men, but also all the menstruation is not, or all the menstruator is not only equal with the the non-menstrual menstruation, but it is value value the humanity. And the other problem that I must mention here, that we are very late to have information about menstruation. We already face the shame, we already face the psychological problem, and we just know about what menstruation. We uh, should have information about menstruation before we have menstruation. That was the ideal age to have that information. And the other is that menstruation is women business. No, it's not. it is it is also not the hygiene, not the sanitation, and not the sexual reproduction issue merely, but also it is a human right issue. And I think the next conversation is we have to connect the conversation about menstruation with the conversation about the human right. Yeah.
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 And so with all of this, my question to everyone would be, what is the future that you're would want to create in your respective countries? And this is also can be as a question that how do we change the narrative on menstruation and ensure dignified menstruation? Shall we start with Radha again?
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
Actually, I have already shared some extent. We need to change the narratives. We don't need the big project, but we need the mindset. From mindset, we have to change. The menstruation is beyond the hygiene and infrastructure, or hygiene to dignity. Number one. 2, 5 days leading to life cycle approach, or beyond that in some cultures. Women's business to everyone business. And it is beyond the private concern to political concern. And the final one, the gender policy, existing gender policy is not enough to identify the menstruators and their preference, their needs, and prioritize. That is why we need to shift from gender policy to dignified menstruation policy. These are the 5 key points we need to uh, have to implement for changing the narratives around menstruation or for dignified menstruation.
Okay, let me hear from Millie.
So definitely, I think that first is that we have to accept that like we've been saying, is that there is no dignity at the moment in menstruation or for menstruators. And to first understand what that definition is. So before we can ensure dignity for every single individual, menstruating or not, and achieve that freedom from any or all forms of violence perpetrated by menstrual discrimination. One is that the menstrual movement is big, and right now as well, it is popularizing, but again, it's still lacking that dignity. So first, we foresee that stakeholders in the menstrual movement need to recognize and adopt the dignified menstruation framework. And this means to prioritize dignity in hygiene and products and in infrastructure and everything else. Dignity must be first when we talk about menstruation and menstrual talk, because it is the vital component that one is the umbrella term that encapsulates all of these different components, but again, prioritizes dignity. So one of the campaigns that the original founding Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation is running is a campaign to lobby the UN to recognize dignified menstruation as a part of the 16 days of activism that occurs in December. So if we can share that petition as well at the end of this live so that folks can sign it as well. That's one simple step that you can take today to recognize dignified menstruation, to adopt it within yourself, and to advocate as a lobby to the UN. In terms of other steps that I think are very vital, one is research. This is to conduct research and collect disaggregated data on menstruators' experience with discrimination across the globe. And I know that we're currently running a project as well. And if interested, you can definitely get in contact with us about that. In the global north, I specifically have concerns and some challenges that occur around, first, recognizing that menstrual discrimination exists in the global north. And this is beyond period poverty, because yes, period poverty exists, but we do have extended access, yet there is no dignity. One quick example is that during this COVID lockdown, there was a COVID lockdown and we had a curfew, and there was a young menstruator who had broken the curfew to go to the store to get a menstrual product. And when she did, she was approached by a police officer who reprimanded her and asked her why she was breaking curfew. And when she did, she said that she went there to get her menstrual product, and this non-menstruator cited her and took her to jail because she broke curfew. And when she asked him, it was my menstruation, it's something I cannot control, she was told that you should know when you're menstruating. And I'm sure as menstruators, we know that bleeding can be irregular. And this again points to the fact that we see menstruation as this thing that can be controlled and this thing that women should hide. And so this idea that she told this publicly, and the fact that she was breaking these social rules around it, led to her being imprisoned for a while. And so, these little examples like this, and the fact that we use euphemisms like blue blood, sanitary products, whisper, secrets, all these different things, these are euphemisms for menstruation and menstrual products, because we are scared of it. We are scared of the bleeding. We fear it. We think it's dirty. So first is to really recognize that it exists here in the global north, in these urban centers. And two, to figure out how we can then work alongside deconstructing our idea of menstruation and of menstrual health, and how do we go about collaborating with folks in the global south so that we can transform these ideas and the advocacy around menstruation and menstrual health. And I think a lot of that her with social media campaigns, because right now we're stuck in the home. Also because now we're in the era of technology, and here we are from Philippines, Nepal, Indonesia, USA. And so I think it really begins with conversation, and we're doing that. So if viewers from the Philippines would also love to follow us on social medias, we'd be happy to share that as well.
Yeah. And lastly, Anna?
Okay, Milia already explained everything. I will be very quick. Okay, the first is open conversation. We can use this COVID pandemic to see that the taboo and the stigma regarding menstruation is very irrelevant, and so we have to change the mindset. And this COVID pandemic really helps to see that. Okay, the second is we use holistic approach when talking about dignity. For example, when we talk about the SDGs goals, the SDGs, we talk about the opportunity for school. We cannot talk about the facility, but we also have to talk about there is no mocking during the menstruation for the student. And the third is create as much as possible uh, material for campaign to change the conversation from hygiene, sanitation, sexual reproduction to dignity. And don't forget to follow our social media. And we also have a petition for you, and that we want to make the December 8th as the Dignified Menstruation Day, to to emphasize the importance of the dignity during menstruation, and to put the conversation of menstruation on the conversation on human rights. Okay.
Okay, Radha, can you tell us more about our what we are lobbying for December 8th, so that it will be declared as a dignified menstruation day?
Yeah. By considering the abuses, violence, discrimination, restriction as a gender-based violence, we picked up the December 8th as a dignified menstruation day to acknowledge the essence of the menstruation globally. 16 days activism, which is started every year from November 25 and in December 10. And December month considered as a human right month. That is why we picked up the December 8th to acknowledge the menstruation. And coming December 8th is the second International Dignified Menstruation Day. And we have a slogan for 2020, Menstrual Talk Dignity First. So to all beers and the stakeholders, on behalf of the Global South Coalition, we urge to celebrate, to mark the day. If you really believe on dignified menstruation, or if you really wanted to stand for preventing sexual and gender-based violence, or improving sexual and reproductive health, or promotion of human rights, or achieving or working for the SDGs, let's celebrate the December 8th as a dignified menstruation day. And for this, we have already Nepal government, Ministry of Women, Children and Senior Citizen has already processed for the UN to endorse that day officially by UN. And also we have the petition. My colleagues has already shared about it. And we already started the varieties of activities from our respective countries. We have friends from UK, friends from different parts of the US and Uganda, Tanzania. So many friends are Sri Lanka. So the friends are coming up. Australia. So they also already started to prepare and celebrate for that day. And that day is really very important for all of us to have a dialogue within the person first, because both men, boys, or trans men or queer, we keep struggling within ourselves. It's a intrapersonal conflict. Why should I born like this? Why should I have this? Why don't I born in the rich family? Why the societies have that kind of practice for the menstruation? So this kind of experiences keep coming. Right now, I'm writing the report of the online survey of dignified menstruation amid COVID-19, and I really feel in one way very sad, the other way very happy, because this is the data from the global community, and the every most of the respondent are saying that the menstruation is dirty, impure, disgusting, shock, and they cannot share publicly, and more than half of the menstruators know about the menstruation only the day of their menstruation, or leaking, or stand on their school decks, or their friends notice. So this kind of things is still happening in 21st century. That is why it is very important, because we all menstruators deserve the dignity during menstruation, and the non-menstruators as a human being, they also have to acknowledge the essence of menstruation of their existence. Not, without menstruation, non-menstruators cannot create it by the nature. That is why this is the high time to acknowledge the menstruation, both menstruators and non-menstruators. And that is why it is very much significant to celebrate the day, December 8, 2020.
Okay, thank you, Radha, and we'll be looking forward to the different activities of the different chapters of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. And so an hour is actually quickly passed, but before we end our episode for today, we would like to ask, what will be your parting words for our viewers? Just a short a minute, each one of you. So we'll start first with Millie, then Anna, and then we end with Radha, so that she can actually expound more on what will be your parting words. Millie?
My parting words are really that, I bleed, you bleed, we all bleed. This is a force of nature. This is a phenomenon, and this is natural, and this is something that must be accepted, and this is something that will not go away. And so unless and until we work on it together, it is something that will be a challenge to achieve the SDGs, as well as to achieve gender equity and peace.
Yeah, and maybe you would want them to follow you or in social media? Yeah, you
yes,
can
of
plug it
course.
also.
Yes. I will do a little comment on the official Facebook post, but it is Dignified Menstruation USA. It's dignified_menstruation, or you can follow me at _milluminate. I can also include that. But thank you so much for this platform and for doing this part in the advocacy for menstruation.
Okay, Anna?
Okay, I will be very short. Every time you talk about menstruation, you talk about dignity first. Menstrual talk, dignity first. Okay, and you can follow also our Indonesia chapter. You can find DM Indonesia chapter on the Facebook.
Okay, thank you. And Radha?
Thank you. We all agreed that this is the everyone business. That is why you feel free to follow us wherever you are. Philippines, Australia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Uganda, USA, Canada, UK. And if any of you like to work voluntarily, please contact any country coordinators. We are available in Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We are everywhere. And if any of you like to have a membership for the Global South Coalition, you are most welcome. There is information available in the website, and we are very happy to bring more. And let's cheers the menstruation. This is because of the menstruation we are here, and we will be continue. This is why this is the high time to celebrate.
Yes, this is a very high time to pursue the talks about menstruation, and we are very thankful for all of our guests for sharing all your knowledge, sharing all your experiences with this advocacy. And we hope that we have inspired our viewers, and we welcome them if they would want to volunteer and join us in this advocacy. So for the Philippines, we also have an FB page. You can follow us also. So I think there will be a video that will be displayed concerning about MDM. Thank you everyone for participating, and we hope that everyone will have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve.
We need to operationalize ideas. We have a lot of ideas to solve problems of the world.
How can we build and scale the new business models, products and services, marketplaces, partnerships, and alliances that will strengthen our resilience in the areas of food security, public health and wellness, education, and social cohesion and culture?